The smell of wet, wild earth is everywhere. Red, small leaves of the maple are clenched like a hand, like girls at their first communion. The pear trees stand. Oh, I must pass nothing by without loving it much. The raindrop, try with my lips, the grass with my touch. For how can I be sure I shall see again the world on the 1st of May, shining after the rain? If you have a chalice or a candle at home, I invite you to take it now and to light the flame together with me as we join in this affirmation of our liberal faith. We kindle this flame to illuminate the world we seek. In the search for truth, may we be just. In the search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace. And now a reading from the book Myths to Live by Joseph Campbell. What is, or what is to be, the new mythology? Since myth is of the order of poetry, let us ask a poet, Walt Whitman, for example, in his Leaves of Grass. I have said that the soul is not more than the body, and I have said that the body is not more than the soul, and nothing, not God, is greater to one than oneself is. And there's no object so soft, but it makes a hub for the wheeled universe. And any man or woman shall stand cool and composed before 1,000,000 universes. And I call to humankind, be not curious about God, for I who am curious about each am not curious about God. Why should I wish to see God better than this day? I see something of God in every hour of the 24, and each moment then. In the faces of men and women, I see God, and in my own face, in the glass, I find letters of God dropped in the street, and every one signed with God's name. And I leave them where they are, for I know that others will punctually arrive forever and ever. These lines of Whitman echo marvelously the sentiments of the earliest of the Upanishads, the great forest book from the 8th century BC. This that people say, worship this God, worship that God, one God after another. All this is God's creation indeed, and he himself is all the gods, entered into our universe, even to our fingertips, like a razor in a razor case, or fire in the firewood. When breathing, he becomes breath by name. When speaking, voice. When seeing, the eye. When hearing, the ear. When thinking, mind. These are but the names of God's acts. We hear the same in a powerful style even earlier from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, in one of its chapters on coming forth by day in the underworld, as follows: I am yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I have the power to be born a second time. I am the divine hidden soul who created the gods. Indeed, do we not hear the same from Christ himself, as reported in the early Gnostic Gospel according to Thomas? Whoever drinks from my mouth shall become as I am, and I myself shall become he, and the hidden things shall be revealed to him. I am the all, and the all came forth from me, and the all attained to me. Cleave a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up a stone, and you will find me there. God is an intelligible sphere whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere. So we're told in a little 12th century book known as the Book of the 24 Philosophers. Each of us, whoever and wherever he may be, is then the center, and within him or her, whether he or she knows it or not, is the mind at large, the laws of which are the laws not only of all minds, but of all space as well. For as I've already pointed out, we are children of this beautiful planet that we've lately seen photographed from the moon. We were not delivered to it by some god, but have come forth from it. We are its eyes and mind, its seeing and its thinking. And the earth, together with its sun, this light around which we fly like a moth, came forth, we're told, from a nebula, and the nebula in turn from space, so that we are the mind ultimately of space. No wonder then if its laws are our laws as well. Likewise, our depths are the depths of space. Our mythology now, therefore, is to be of infinite space and its light, which is without as well as within. Like moths, we're caught in the spell of its allure, flying to it outward to the moon and beyond, and flying to it also inward. On our planet, all dividing horizons have been shattered. We can no longer hold our loves at home and project our aggressions elsewhere, for on this spaceship Earth, there is no elsewhere any longer. And so, to return to our opening question, what is or what is to be the new mythology? It is and will forever be, as long as the human race exists, the old, everlasting, perennial mythology in its subjective sense, poetically renewed in terms neither of a remembered past nor a projected future, but of now, addressed, that is to say, not to the flattery of peoples, but to the waking of individuals in the knowledge of themselves. not simply as egos fighting for place on the surface of this beautiful planet, but equally as centers of mind at large, each in his or her own way, at one with all and with no horizons. For our meditation this morning, I invite you to visualize our own planet, our Mother Earth, as it might be seen from space. I invite you to visualize the swirling clouds, the azure oceans, the dusty continents and snowy polar caps, the coral reefs and the equatorial forests. And visualize the thin blue layer of atmosphere that envelops this planet, set as it is in the dark, inky blackness of the Milky Way. And then to breathe. Our time is short here on Earth. Around us swirl immensities of time and space, a universe infinite in all directions. How small our hopes and cares can seem amid the panorama of creation. And yet we are not separate from the cosmos, but we have evolved and grown out of it. And our thoughts are its thoughts, and our lives are a manifestation of its never-ending vitality. Our spirit's a microcosm of the beauty and creativity of the whole. Fill us then with compassion and reverence for all our kin, for cloud and sun, for robin and morning glory, for the multitude of beings who share this improbable and never to be repeated moment. All expressions like ourselves of the mind at large, the spirit at play, the dynamism at work, in whom we live and move, and whom we will never fully know. For almost 4 decades, Joseph Campbell taught comparative mythology at Sarah Lawrence College, authoring a series of books on the archetypes that shape the human mind and its relation to the cosmos. Titles like The Masks of God and The Hero with 1,000 Faces. But he's probably best remembered as the consultant to George Lucas, who helped to envision Star Wars as a myth for modern times. This morning, I offer a presentation that's drawn from interviews Campbell shared with Michael Toms on New Dimensions Radio, and drawn from conversations with Bill Moyers shortly before his death in 1987. So here, in his own words, is a chance to meet Joseph Campbell. One of our problems today is that we're not well acquainted with the literature of the spirit, we're interested in the news of the day and the problems of the hour. Plato and Greek and Latin, biblical literature, these used to be part of everyone's education. Confucius and the Buddha and Goethe, others who speak to eternal values amid a world of change. These little bits of information from ancient times, which have to do with themes that have supported human life, that have built civilizations, that have informed religions over the millennia. These all have to do with deep inner problems, with inner mysteries, with inner thresholds of passage. And if you don't know what the guide signs are along the way, well, you have to work them out for yourself. And then when you get to be older and the concerns of the day have all been attended to, and you turn toward the inner life, well, if you don't know what that is or where it is, you might be sorry. I was brought up as a Roman Catholic, and one of the great advantages of growing up as a Roman Catholic is that you're taught to take myth seriously and let it operate on your life, and you live in terms of these mythic motifs. I was brought up in terms of the seasonal relationships to the cycle of Christ coming into the world and teaching in the world, and dying and resurrecting and going to heaven. The ceremonies all through the year keep you in mind of that eternal core, all that changes in time. And then I fell in love with American Indians, because every year Buffalo Bill used to bring his Wild West show to Madison Square Garden. And I wanted to know more about Indians. And my father and mother were very generous parents. They found whatever books were being written for boys on Indians at that time. So I started to read the American Indian myths, and it wasn't long before I realized that the motifs found in these American Indian stories were the same ones that I was being taught by the nuns in school. And later I got interested in Hinduism, and there were the same stories again. And in my graduate work, I was dealing with the Arthurian material from medieval times, and there were the stories, the same stories again. You've got the same body, you've got the same organs and energies that Cro-Magnon man had 30,000 years ago, living a human life in New York City, or living a human life in the caves as a cave dweller. You go through the same stages of childhood, coming into sexual maturity, transformation of the dependency of childhood into the responsibility of manhood or womanhood. There's marriage, and then there's the failure of the body, the gradual loss of its power and death. You've got the same body, the same bodily experiences, and so you respond to the same images. For example, a constant image is this conflict of the eagle and the serpent. The serpent's bound to earth, the eagle in spiritual flight. Isn't that a conflict, a tension that we all experience? You're born as a child in a state of dependency, and the whole psychology of a human being from birth up to 12 or 15 years of age is in this mode of dependency. And if you're going for your PhD, this goes on until you're 45. You can tell if a person has broken through by how many footnotes there are in their writing. And then there comes a central requirement, and this is one of psychological transformation and the mythological themes and practices help to make this. The individual has to move from dependency to authority and has to move from childhood to adulthood. And this is the crisis that Freud's dealing with in his psychoanalysis all the time. The person who's still a child, to the father or the mother, to evolve out of this position of psychological immaturity to the courage of self-responsibility and assurance, requires a death and a resurrection. And that's the basic motif of the universal hero's journey, leaving one condition behind and finding the source of life and energy to bring you to a fuller, more mature condition. And in old traditional cultures, well, in India, for example, there's an actual moment of transformation where the clothing that's worn is changed on a ceremonial occasion, and the little boy or the little girl then becomes an adult. Now, it's easier for women to grow up than for men. Believe me, I taught women for 38 years, and I know this. Life overtakes the woman with that first menstruation. She's a woman and doesn't really have to do anything about it. The boy has to act, and this is the sense of ferocity that so many male initiation rites take. And the boy has to be transformed. The girl's transformed by nature, the boy by society. He's circumcised and scarified, and all kinds of things are done to him, so he no longer has that little boy body. And this is an important transformation that the myth can help us to define, but the transformation always takes place in terms of a given society. And then within that given society, there are transformations further, the assumption of authorities, the putting on of the robes of the judge or the doctor, or whatever role that individual has chosen to serve an idea, a craft, a technique, a truth, and not just serving himself. And then finally, there comes disengagement. There comes a moment in life when you've really had it. If you didn't do it, it wasn't done. It's not going to happen. You can't do it now. And this business of disengagement, letting go, that requires mythological help. Birth, marriage, and death. These are the three great moments. But during a lifetime, there are other transformations also that I think are best mapped, best symbolized in that wonderful tradition of India of Kundalini Yoga. And you can see how life is lived on these 7 different levels. The first level, the chakra down at the base of the body, is simply uninspired, hanging on to life. There's no enthusiasm, there's no action, there's only reaction. You're living in terms of concrete facts. And well, when I think of this kind of life, I always think of dragons. Dragons guard things in caves. They guard piles of gold, and they guard beautiful virgins, and they don't know what to do with either of them. And so they just hang on. People like this we call creeps. This is the lowest range. And then the next, there's that awakening that comes in adolescence. And this is the erotic. Suddenly, life is transformed. Nietzsche describes that first condition as a groveling before sheer fact, but there's no such thing as a sheer fact. There's only a fact for a subject. And suddenly in adolescence, one falls in love, and that stupid fact that was only Susie yesterday is now a goddess, and you've turned her into something. There's this initiative coming from you, and there's a whole range of religious disciplines that are based on this love principle, the ways of love, the 5 ways they speak of in the Vaishnava tradition, for example. The love of the servant for the master, the way of the friend to the friend, the love of a parent for a child, the way of love in marriage. And then there's just that wild, mad love, and when it overtakes you, you and your world can go to pieces. When love hits you that way, you're lucky. You're lucky, and you're lucky if you survive it. It's a tremendous thing. And that's when the separateness is annihilate, and you break through to a metaphysical realization. And then comes the next level, and this is the one on which the world lives. It's that of the chakra at the level of the navel, which is aggression. All politics is aggression. It has to be, because you are standing for a group, and you're standing for an idea against something. It may be the most spiritual idea, but it's against what isn't spiritual. And the whole aggression of the missionary movement is an example of this. Live on these 3 levels. Animals live on these 3 levels. These are the levels of holding on to life, reproducing life, and winning. And this is what most popular religions are concerned with health and wealth and progeny, winning the war, God send us rain for our crops, and all that sort of thing. And for each of these 4 centers, it can be envisioned in symbolic form. At the base, for example, the first one, the symbol is the lingam and the yoni, the male and female sexual organs in conjunction. And at the heart center, there again, they are represented by the male and female organs in conjunction, but now they are represented in gold as symbolic of a virgin birth, which is to say, the birth of the spiritual person out of the animal. It happens when you awaken at the heart level to compassion, shared suffering, the experienced participation in the suffering of another human being. That is the beginning of who we are. And when it happens, then you might say, we come to this center where the vision of God is. The vision of God, what is that? Well, it's right here. It's right here in front of your face. The whole idea of God in the West is that God is a fact out there somewhere, and that this fact created the world. And that's a very crude idea about God. God is the personification of an energy. It's the energy that fills our world. It's the energy of consciousness that's right in here. And if you want to see it, personified, look around you. There it is, the only personification, the only anthropomorphic manifestation of the deity is in men and women and children. And that kind of realization, people are ready for it, but they've been told, oh, no, no, God's out there somewhere. At a lecture a long time back, I had the indiscretion to say to a group of people, bring forth the Christ within you. That Christ power, which is Buddha power, because all beings are Buddha beings and all people are Christ people. And there was a priest there in the audience who said that is blasphemy. Now, when you have a religion that transforms a metaphor into a fact, you're in trouble. God is a metaphor. It's a poetic idea speaking beyond itself. There's a Hermetic text that was translated in the 13th century from the Greek into Latin called the Book of the 24 Philosophers. And there we read that God is an intelligible sphere, that is, a sphere known to the mind, whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. And the center is right where you are sitting. And each of us is a manifestation of that mystery. Ramakrishna once said that if all you think about are your sins, then you are a sinner. Well, when I read that, I thought of my own boyhood, going to confession on Saturdays and meditating on all the little sins I'd committed during that week. And now I think rather one should go and say, bless me, Father, for I have been great. And these are all the good things I've done this week. Identify your notion of yourself with the positive rather than the negative. You see, religion really is a kind of a second womb. It's designed to bring forth this extremely complicated thing, which is a human being, to bring it to maturity. Before I was married, I used to go out to restaurants around town for my lunch and dinner. And Thursday night was the maids' night off in Bronxville, so that many of the families were out in restaurants. One fine evening, I was in my favorite restaurant there, and over at the next table, there was sitting a father and a mother and a scrawny little boy. The father said to his son, drink your tomato juice. And the boy said, I don't want to. And the father said in a louder voice, I said, drink your tomato juice. And the mother said, don't make him do things he doesn't want to do. And the father looked at her and he said, he can't go through life doing just what he wants to do. If he only does what he wants to do, he'll be dead. Why, look at me. I've never done a thing I wanted to do in my entire life. Well, that's a man who never followed his bliss. You may have success in life, but just think about it. What kind of life was it? What good was it? You never did a thing you wanted to do in your entire life. I always tell my students, go where your mind and your heart and your soul want to go. Now, I came to this idea of bliss because in Sanskrit, which is the spiritual language of the world, there are three terms that represent the brink, the threshold, the jumping off place to transcendence. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat means being, Chit means consciousness, and Ananda means bliss or rapture. And I thought to myself, I don't really know whether my consciousness is the proper kind of consciousness or not. I don't really know if my being is proper being or not, but I do know where my rapture is. So let me hang on to rapture, and I think that'll bring both my consciousness and my being. And you know what? It worked. The religious people tell us that we can't really experience bliss until we die to go to heaven, but I believe in having as much of you as you can of this experience while we're still alive. Follow your bliss, and you put yourself on a kind of track that's been there all the while. And the life that you're living is the life that you ought to be living. And when you see that, you begin to meet people who are in the field of your bliss, and they start to open doors for you. I say, follow your bliss and don't be afraid. The big question is whether you're going to say a hearty yes to your own adventure, to the adventure of the hero, to the adventure of being alive. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Gary. Before I ask Gary for our closing words, I want to take a moment to thank our members and friends of the congregation for your continued financial support. Your willingness to share your resources with the congregation is crucial to our ability to continue our mission even as we meet virtually and as we begin to look forward to meeting in person and a return to connections perhaps that we've been waiting to reestablish. Now to Gary for closing words, and then to Martha for our postlude.
Closing words are from Joseph Campbell. We have not even to risk the adventure alone, for the heroes of all time have gone before us. The labyrinth is thoroughly known. We have only to follow the thread of the hero path. And where we thought to find an abomination, we shall find a god. And where we had thought to slay another, we shall slay ourselves. And where we had thought to travel outward, we shall come to the center of our own existence. And where we had thought to be alone, we shall be with all the world. And now we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of caring, or the fire of commitment. These are with us until we gather again.
Thank you, Martha. If you'd like to join a discussion, please turn on your video and your audio and go to gallery view.